All right. Here we are. Live, ready to take a dive. Ready to start out this weekend right. Starting to get that a little closer. There we go. Or I guess finish out the weekend. Fuck. What am I even talking about? Well, welcome. This is Sunday story time with Romper. And we have, over the last couple weeks, gone through this entire book. And we are on the last segment. Here we are. We've come to the finale. We're ready to see the Men in Black save the world one more time. I mean, you know it's going to happen. There's no doubt about it. There's no, question in your mind. There's no way there can be such, because they're the Men in Black, They're here to save the planet from certain doom. So, this is also the last week of our regular programming, because it's the holiday time, and whether you celebrate Hanukkah or Christmas or whatever, it's the holidays. And so next week we will have a holiday set and a holiday book, probably more Gremlin stuff, because that's one of my favorite holiday things, and they don't make much Die Hard shit. So, But, yeah, so here we are. We're at the last part of this book. We're done with this season, I guess you could call it. I'm also going to put a little bit more time into my production, I guess you could say. I mean, not like I skimp and shit like that, but gonna come up with a little bit more scripts and things like that, so it's a little bit less off the cuff. Maybe some jokes. See how that works out. We'll fucking see. Yeah. So next week we celebrate Christmas here. So it'll be Christmassy themed, but no matter what holiday you celebrate, it's a time for family. It's a time for love. It's a time for friendship and for stories and things like that. So we'll be getting right into a Christmas story next week. Not a Christmas story, but a Christmas story. So yeah, we're at chapter 19 in Men in Black 2. Shit's about to hit the fan. They have, gone and armed up. They've assembled their team. They're ready to take back the headquarters from Selena. They are ready to whoop her ass by any means necessary, by Men in Black means necessary. So, I'm gonna have one little sip of my tea, which does have lemon this week. Thank you, Julie. If you've been curious about what tea I've been sipping on, since this is also a tea thing, I have been having the Bigelow peppermint flavored tea. So what I do is I heat up my water. I add a little pinch of stevia in here. When the water's heated up, I start to steep my tea through the bag. Today, what I did though was I took and zested a lemon, and I put that into a little tea sifter device that we have, and I let that float in the tea for about 10 minutes before I brought it over here and have been enjoying it. It has a nice little lemon flavor. It has a nice little bit of taste, a little bit of bite that adds to the peppermint lemon. It's very delicious. Thank you, Julie. You have opened up my eyes to this. This is not sponsored by Bigelow, but I do endorse this. It's not bad. There's better stuff, but this is what we're drinking. So here we are. Without further ado, Chapter 19 of Men in Black 2. Jay emerged from the elevator just in time to hear a computerized voice announce, "Launch in 4 minutes." He was heading for the waiting spaceship when suddenly his path was blocked by Yara. The 8-foot-tall alien didn't walk so much as he seemed to float. "Yara," Jay said, on guard but keeping up a cool front. He'd been the one to take down Yara. Bring him in. See that he was locked up all nice and safe. He knew that this guy was capable of, and it wasn't pretty. A man who will steal your ozone won't stop at anything. "You're cruising around smoothly these days." "Bored," Jay's nemesis replied dismissively. "Had a little time to tinker down in solitary." His cape dropped like a theater curtain. Beneath it, his body no longer ended in legs, but in gleaming metal disc. It was half Yara, half flying saucer. As if there weren't enough, a hatch in Yara's new improved lower torso opened, and 5 smaller but identical Yara/Saucermen came flying out like hornets from a hive. Only instead of stings, they had clutches of metal tentacles dangling from the bottoms of their little spacecraft. They looked like a miniature fleet of high-tech Portuguese man-of-war jellyfish. "Paperclip here, piece of wire there," Yara went on. He sounded a lot like one of the regular guys down at the corner bar, proudly explaining to his pals that he'd been managed to fix a leaky pipe without needing a plumber, using only chewy gum, shellac, and duct tape. Of course, very few regular guys have tentacles, even on the advanced episodes of This Old House. One of Yara's limbs whacked Jay hard across the face, sending him reeling. It would take more than a tentacle delivered smack in the chops to take an MIB agent out, though especially someone like Agent J. "Need to take the girl with me," he told Yara matter-of-factly, as if it were all settled. Not according to Yara, it wasn't. "Over our dead titanium bodies," the alien replied. At his words, the 5 smaller Yaras began spinning like tops, tentacles outstretched, a flock of bantamweight buzzsaws surrounding Agent J, and then, slowly, tightening the circle. This was going to be messy, but obviously that was okay by Yara. Like all good hands-on, or tentacles-on guys, Yara didn't mind when it got down and dirty. Yara liked messy, but only when he was on the mess-making end of the process. From this point of view, messy didn't get any better than this, when the mess-E was one of his most hated enemies. He smiled. Deep in the warren of air vents that ran throughout Men in Black headquarters, the worm guys proceeded with caution. Now that luck had given them the opportunity to help their old friends, Agents J and K, without the nasty inconvenience of getting their rubbery hides shot full of holes, they were the most gung-ho of gang of spineless action heroes on the face of the planet. Hooah! "Approaching J5 to intersection above sub-control panel 7R Delta," Giebel reported into his communicator. This was so cool. Getting to relay nifty hardcore tech information, being an integral part of the big deal rescue and release op. To his mind, he sounded just like Tom Cruise or Bruce Willis. Or could there be a greater thrill of this side of heaven? William Shatner? "J. K. Over?" He got no response. That might have been worrisome, if not for the fact that he didn't have time to worry. Up ahead, Sleeble heard something and came to an abrupt halt. He held up one hand, listening intently. The rest of the worms stopped in their tracks and did likewise. It would have been the perfect moment for someone to remark, "It's quiet. Too quiet." Only it wasn't. The metal walls of the air vent rattled and clattered with the sound of scores of tiny footsteps. Giebel motioned for the worms to get down. Tension filled the air vent like the 2-day-old turkey gravy. Just ahead, a beam of light poured into the shaft from an opening overhead. The worms stared at it, transfixed, waiting. The light vanished as the opening flooded with dozens upon dozens of fully armed alien insects. Crickets. Serlena's minions. Their weapons chattered and roared and flashed, filling the confines of the vent with wild ricocheting shots, a storm of shrapnel, a deluge of destruction, a monsoon of mayhem. The worm guys fired back, but they were no match for the crickets, who had them outnumbered by at least 12 to 1. All they could do was defend themselves as best they could. Even so, they found themselves being pushed back, further and farther from their goal, down the unfeeling gullet of the air vent system into a dead end. Dead and end were the operative words of the moment. Their carefree lives as swinging bachelors flashed before their eyes. To a worm, they felt the deep pangs of regret. If they survived this, they knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that they would live their lives differently afterward. For one thing, they would get the hell out of accountancy. Sure, there was glamour, the perks, the groupies, but sheesh, it was just too damn dangerous. In the main hall, Kay was having a reunion with Serlina that was only slightly less amicable than the one she'd had earlier with Zed. The beautiful alien picked him up and threw him up against the wall with all considerable strength in her. He hit with a sickening, bone-jarring crash and slumped against it, fighting to recapture the breath she'd slammed out of his body. Serlina assumed human face writhed with unholy bloodlust, neural roots pulsing visibly beneath the surface of her skin. I should have taken care of you when I had the chance. Kay managed to tell her. She responded to him by punching him full in the face. You wouldn't be in the mess if you had done what you were told, and she'd still be alive, she snarled at him. All of the frustration, the bitterness, the unnecessary inconvenience he put her through over this business of hiding the light of Zartha welled up inside her, choking her with rage. Why this stupid, puny earthling scum had ever dreamed he could keep her from her goal. The nerve, the unmitigated nerve of the creature. But he had managed to do that, even if it had only been a stopgap strategy. He'd sent her off on a wild goose chase that had consumed years, 25 long years. He'd forced her people to defer the destruction of Zartha, made all Kylothians dance to his tune, and worst of all, he'd made her look like the fool in front of a goodly share of the galaxy. No one embarrassed Serlina in public and got away with it. She could kill him now. That would be easy. But first, she was going to make sure he suffered. You did love Lorana, didn't you, Kay? She hissed, slipping the invisible knife deep into his heart and twisting. He leapt for her throat, hands closing around her windpipe, but Serlina's body wasn't what it seemed. He'd forgotten that in his blind anger. His hand sank through what should have been solid flesh, becoming enmeshed in a network of neural roots that lurked just below the counterfeit skin. They sprouted up around his wrists and spread, growing, slithering, enveloping his body in a brambly green nest that would become his tomb. Serlina's smile was every bit as smug as Yara's. Ooh. Let's get a little sip of this wonderful tea. Delicious. As for Yara, up on the launch pad, the Kylothian's henchman was enjoying himself, playing Napoleon as he commanded his mini armada of flying replicas to circle J and move in for the kill. The 5 small Yaras whirred around the MIB agent, sharp metal tentacles deployed and spinning. They rushed in and retreated, sometimes taking individuals' turns at pummeling him, sometimes attacking in pairs or all together. It was clear to anyone watching that their father was merely toying with his foe. Jay did what he could to fight back. His deadlier weaponry had been knocked far out of his reach, but the rooftop was strewn with the remains of Yara's mechanical dabblings. He ducked down and grabbed a piece of pipe from the floor, swinging wildly at the little saucerman like a man beset by a swarm of determined mosquitoes. It made one hell of a fly swatter. And it was just about as effective. The little Yaras backed off from Jay's flailing pipe, then zipped in at him whenever there was an opening, their tentacles scoring hit after hit. Jay finally got lucky and connected with one of the persistent pests, slamming it with the pipe so hard that it went flipping away end over end before coming down with an awesome crash. Yarrow was only mildly disturbed to observe its demise, and his irked expression quickly vanished. After all, they were more concerned where that one had come from. As far as he was concerned, great minions were made, not born. Give Yarrow enough duct tape, and he could rule the world. Scratch/Charlie had been born, not made, but that only went to prove Yarrow's theory. The two-headed alien wasn't exactly burning up the charts, or heading, no pun intended, for the Minion Hall of Fame. If success was all about teamwork, you think that a creature that already was his own team would be destined to do well. And you'd be wrong. Somewhere within Men in Black headquarters, Scratch/Charlie was running through a hallway, the glittering orb of the proton detonator cupped securely in his hands. He looked like a man who had been given his mission and was hastening to accomplish it. But appearances could be quite deceiving. "We cannot set that detonator," Charlie was arguing. "We were given an order," Scrad replied, as if that settled everything. Not for Charlie, it didn't. "By who? Worm Lady?" His recent painful interview with the Kylothian had left its mark on his attitude, as well as on his face. It had turned him into a real question authority kind of guy, as opposed to the unscarred Scrad, who was apparently the sort who claimed he was just following orders, no matter how dirty the deed. But all he said to Charlie was, "Shut up." Charlie felt very strong about his convictions. In this case, he wasn't going to take no for an answer. He wasn't going to just take shut up for an answer either, come to think of it. "I love you," he told Scrad, "but you've given me no choice." Concentrating fiercely, Charlie bent his mind to the task of overpowering his body mate. Scrad stared, shocked as his own hand began to act independently of his will, rising up in response to Charlie's hostile takeover and grabbing him by the face. The hand yanked, and Scrad/Charlie flipped over, doing a beautiful mid-air cartwheel and landing, for a miracle, on his feet. "You no-good son of a bitch!" Scrad bellowed, and punched Charlie right in his already much abused nose. "My sinuses!" Charlie howled, and the battle was on in earnest. Actually, it was more like the best of the Three Stooges marathon than any battle the world had ever seen. The nameless pop psych guru, who counseled "don't be too hard on yourself," would have fled the sight in sensitive New Age tears. Many hands make light work, but one pair of hands, shared by two minds, no matter how tiny those minds may be, is going to become very confused when it comes to beating the living daylights out of the other guy. In this situation, who was the other guy? Damned if Scratch/Charlie's body knew. The same hand that smacked Scrad across the face turned like an angry viper and poked Charlie in the eye. The same hand that twisted Charlie's ear became the first that clobbered Scrad. Someone obviously knew jujitsu, because the two-headed alien was throwing himself all over the place in a series of flips, twists, and somersaults that would have earned him a gold in the gymnastics at the Olympics. In the air vent, the besieged worm guys didn't need to worry about being hard on themselves. The vicious horde of armed and deadly alien crickets was taking care of that for them. Though the worms were heavily equipped, with enough weapons to make them a walking armory, it didn't help matters that the enemy had the capability to overpower them by a sheer force of numbers. The worm guys hadn't read a lot of Earth history, but if they had, they would have scared up any number of instances where manpower, not firepower, proved to be the deciding factor in ultimate victory. It was the same principle that decided the outcome of most encounters between elephants and army ants. So it was that the worm guys developed a gut feeling about their chances for survival. It was mighty, like indigestion, and no one had thought to pack the Pepto-Bismol. The crickets pressed on, firing their weapons, packing the worm guys tighter and tighter into the dead end. It was all over but the bloodbath. Suddenly the crickets stopped firing. They lowered their weapons ever so slightly and stared in disbelief at the sight that met their googling eyes. Either the worms had gone insane, or they had decided that since they were bound to die anyway, they might as well rob their enemies the pleasure of the kill. That was certainly what it looked like, for the worms apparently had given up the struggle, and instead of returning fire, they were turning their weapons on each other. The crickets gaped as the worms, swiftly and methodically cut themselves in half. Their severed bodies fell to the metal floor with echoing clangs. Funny thing about worms. Funny thing about worm guys. New eyes opened. Limbs regenerated to replace missing arms and legs, completing half bodies, making them whole. While the dumbfounded alien crickets watched, the mass of worm guy segments became a mass of worm guys. The halves that had been holding onto the blasters and ray guns and assorted other armaments tossed their spares to the newly reconstructed brothers. They stood tall, they stood proud, and they stood to outnumber the alien crickets at last. As for the crickets, their maternal egg casing hadn't raised any fools. They did a rapid head count of the opponents, and reasoned that the worm guys might even repeat that slick little trick of divide and regenerate and conquer as many times as they liked. Then they concluded that this wasn't the healthiest place on Earth for a bunch of crickets to be. They dropped their weapons and ran like merry hell. Their pounding feet set up such a resonant racket throughout the ventilation system that it was impossible to tell if the worms, victors of the field, were filling the air ducts with a jubilant chorus of "Hoa." Hopefully they weren't. It was damn annoying. Annoying or not, Jay wouldn't have minded having a "Hoa" moment of his own just then. But it didn't look as if it were in the cards. The hand that Yara had dealt him was out of marked stacked deck, and the murderous ozone pirating alien holding all the aces. Even though he managed to take out one of their numbers, that still left him facing 4 of the mini saucers, not to mention the original full-size Yara himself, and every one of them was sporting a deadly, whirring fringe of sharp metal tentacles. Individually, those things packed quite a sting, and together they could rip a man to shreds. They circled around Jay, trapping him in their midst, and moved in for the final maneuver. "Kill me," Jay conceded. "Let the girl go." Yara smirked. "Such a deal," he said scornfully. One of the little saucers darted out, then zoomed in low, knocking Jay off his feet. The MIB agent took a pratfall, falling hard on his ass. Yara's mocking grimace widened. He was having fun. "Launch in 90 seconds, the star's onboard computer agreed. Jay clambered to his feet just as 2 of Yara's tiny creations came racing in at him from opposite sides. Their tentacles could do more than sting and shred, as Jay discovered. Sometimes they could indulge their master when they wanted to drag out an enemy's death. This deadly pair of saucermen chose to wrap their tentacles around Jay's body and fling him with great force into the jagged metal edges of one of the cannibalized flying saucers. It was like being dropped from a great height onto a coral reef. Bruised and bleeding, Jay picked himself up and confronted the little saucers. "Like to see you 2 try that again," he gasped, taunting them through the red-hot hell of his pain. Yara never could resist a challenge. His mini minions were no different. Playtime was over. Killing time was here and now. The 2 saucers pulled back and set their tentacles to spinning so fast that they became a death-dealing blur. They revved up and took off straight for Jay at a speed so high that when they hit him, he'd experienced firsthand what a papaya feels like in an instant before it gets shoved down the throat of a blender and transformed into a fresh fruit smoothie. But there are some things a man still won't stand for. That's the major difference between a man and a papaya. As the 2 hell-bent saucermen converged on him, Jay waited until the very last second, then leapt high into the air, straight up. He heard the crash just below him as the little Yaras missed their prime target and rammed each other instead. They blew up with a satisfying explosion. He'd been able to take out 3 of the small saucers, but if that just meant that there were 2 remaining, 3 if you counted full-size Yara. The surviving trio stopped fooling around. They moved into delta wing formation, Big Yara riding point, his 2 smaller versions taking the flanks. A flying wedge of death and destruction with tentacles twitching. They barreled in on Jay, who ducked at the last possible moment. Overshooting the target, they pulled to a halt at goodly distance away and regrouped, once again setting themselves into a V shape. Their engines raced, their tentacles flicked hungrily. "I want him in pieces," Yara growled to his followers. Launch in 15 seconds, said the computer as Yara and his two surviving replicas began their approach, gaining speed, homing in on their target. Jay knew from experience that he wouldn't be able to evade them the same way twice. Yara was too sharp for that. The smaller Yara saucers were somehow linked to the creator in such a way that he didn't need to tell them what to do. They knew. They knew, and they would respond to their master's unvoiced directives just as if they were his own arms and now vanished legs. Jay locked eyes with his enemy, saw the evil delight deflected there, saw the light of ugly gratification glowing in Yara's face. The two miniature Yaras wore the same expression, gloating times 3. Jay looked away, scanning the rooftop for something, anything that could help him come out with his skin intact. That was when he saw the first miniature Yara, the one he'd taken out of commission at the start. The saucerman was unconscious, his vehicle useless. To him. Jay had a fast tuck and tumble, scooping up the incapacitated saucer as he flipped back upright, with the same smooth aim and release that made him the terror and reigning champion of the Men in Black annual intramural frisbee competition. He shot the saucer off, edging it towards the small gap that lay between Big Yara and the saucerman who was taking the right flank. It was the sweet spot in the bowling pin setup, the place you wanted the ball to go if you were aiming for a strike. It worked like a charm. Jay's saucer hit Big Yara, who in turn whammed into one, then the other of the smaller saucers. It was the most beautiful demonstration of the ricochet effect he'd ever seen. Pinball combined with bowling for aliens. All 3 saucers spun wildly out of control. The 2 smaller ones hit each other dead on in midair and blew themselves to smithereens in a glorious fireball, while their creator crashed headlong into a pile of discarded spaceship parts. Yara hadn't stopped bouncing before Jay raced into the waiting spacecraft, found the control panel, and hit a bunch of switches. The whine of warming engines died, and the computer voice announced, "Launch aborted." It might have been Jay's imagination, but even the mechanized voice sounded relieved. He untied Laura and helped her to her feet, then escorted her off the spacecraft. Together they approached the mound of spare parts where Yara lay. It had been a damn hard landing. One of his own tentacles had torn a huge gash in the bottom of his no longer flying saucer. Fuel poured from the hole. Highly combustible fuel. "Take the girl," Yara said groggily to Agent Jay. "Let me go." Jay just looked at him. Man steals your planet's ozone. Man's gonna steal your lines too. Might as well steal his. "Such a deal," he replied. He gave the discarded welding torch an easy little kick, sending it rolling toward the shiny streak of leaking saucer fuel. A spark twinkled and ignited the trickle, running greedily along the inflammable trail all the way back up to Yara and inside the evil alien's breached space saucer hull. There was a pause, then a blast that sent Yara flying every which way in a shower of hot shrapnel and former extraterrestrial. "Paperclip here, piece of wire there," said Jay, escorting Laura away from the blaze. He was either mocking his late opponent or simply taking stock of the bits and pieces of Yara as they came pattering back down to Earth. While Jay had been turning his opponent into a shower of metallic odds and ends, Serlina had been choking Kay to within a single breath of his life. The root springing from her hands tightened around his throat as she held him off the ground and happily watched him struggle. Alas, even the greatest pleasures had come to an end. "Have to run, Kay," she said. Sharper, nastier roots extended from her fingers. She shifted her grip, seizing Kay in the middle of his chest, while other roots continued to wrap themselves around him. For a moment, it looked as if she were about to indulge herself in a little game of Aztec high priest and rip the heart right out of his body. It was probably a good thing for Kay that Serlina had never found Earth history relevant to day-to-day living. Just because she was going to tear his heart out didn't mean she was going to spare it, though. "Just before I squeeze you like a tube of toothpaste," she said, "the last thing I want you to think about is all the carnage and destruction that's about to happen because of your stupidity. Didn't happen then, Kay countered. Not going to happen now. She rolled her eyes. Oh, please. You can't stop us, she said. To her surprise, her prey didn't accept the helplessness of his situation, or beg for mercy, or even shut up. Instead, it was as if he knew he had the upper hand, or upper root, or whatever. Kay said, I'll give you one last chance to surrender, you slimy Kybrothian invertebrate. A ferocious smile parted Selina's lips. Her expression spoke volumes. Oh, really? This was just too good, too delicious. The nerve, the stupid blind nerve of this puny earthling. She clearly cut off the flow of oxygen to what passed for a brain in this meat creature. He was either insane, damaged, or living in the fantasy world. He wouldn't be living anywhere much longer. What are you going to do to stop me? She asked, leering. Not me, Kay said. Him. He pointed up. Selina couldn't help but follow where his finger indicated. Her eyes widened. There was Zed and Frank, both free, looking down at her from Zed's office. Zed was holding an old-fashioned over-and-under shotgun in his hand. As she stared, he dropped it. Right into the waiting hands of Agent J, who stood in the doorway with Laura, all of them wearing expressions that declared, You lose. There was a loud, distinctive sound of the old-fashioned gun being cocked, followed by the double blast of both chambers being fired. Selina never had a chance to say a word. She was blasted to chaff and splinters where she stood. Keep her under the desk in case of intruders, Zed said, nodding at the antique shotgun still smoking in Jay's hands. The chips of Selina were falling down where they might. It was the old story. Today a born conqueror, tomorrow bark mulch. Gift from Charlton Heston. Go. At that, J and K lit out of there, taking Laura with them. With luck, there'd be time to hand out commendations and clean up assignments later. Right now, the clock was ticking. The pulsar was blinking, and Earth's salvation or destruction was a matter of minutes away. It was that kind of very moment that the worm guy named Mannix slid down a chute to the air vent system, landed in a chair in front of the keyboard for the sub-control panel, 7R Delta, and typed a rapid series of keystrokes while his fellow worms watched from above. Code 101 deactivated, Mannix announced. We saved MIB! The worms cheered. The main hall of Men in Black headquarters went totally black. Worms, said Kay, by way of explanation to a nonplussed Jay and Laura. Jay's key chain beeped. The Mercedes pulled into the blackened interior of the main hall with its headlights on. Luckily for everyone, the inflatable autopilot sat in the driver's seat. But as soon as the car came to a stop in front of Jay, Kay, and Laura, he was sucked back into his storage compartment. Both Jay and Kay headed for the driver's side at the same time. Again, they did it without thinking, a reflex. For a beat, they stood there, staring at each other, facing off. It looked as if they were ready to argue again. Then, without a word of debate, Jay flipped Kay the car keys. He's back. Got to take him back the way he is, the way he was, who he was. My superior officer, my partner, my friend. He walked around the car, headed to the passenger side. It felt good to have Kay back. For that, he could get used to giving up driving privileges. It was a small enough price to pay. As Jay headed for the passenger side, he told Laura, Give me the bracelet. I'm going with you, she said. She sounded ready to make a stand. Too stubborn to stubborn it out with him was what it took. Mentally, Jay cursed. They didn't have the time for this. Please give me the... He began again. Everyone in, Kay said. Jay threw him a questioning look. He got nothing back. Everyone in. Orders are to be obeyed. No time to squabble about it. No time. They all got into the Mercedes, and Kay threw it into gear. It sped forward across the main hall of MIB headquarters, and dropped from sight down a tunnel that suddenly appeared there. The tunnel led back up to the city streets. Shooting at the other end, the Mercedes got air and came jouncing down onto the pavement, then took a corner in the screech of tires and was gone. In the main hall, all was darkness, all was silence, all was peace. Zed and Frank were busy elsewhere, doing what it took to get MIB back on its feet and functional once more. The worm guys were crowded into the room, with Subcontrol Panel 7R Delta, indulging in an orgy of self-congratulations for quick thinking, heroism under fire, and self-bisection above and beyond the call of duty. No one was watching the main hall. No one needed to. They'd taken care of everything down there. In the darkness, a thin, small scratching sound was heard, soft as a butterfly's belch, or would have been heard if anyone was there to listen. On the floor, amid the scatter and splatter of woody fibers that had been Serlina, something stirred. A neural root moved, stopped, twitched again, paused as if to consider its options, and then grew. Clearly, the old Earth saying was accurate, but incomplete. You can't keep a good man down. Or an evil Kylothian neural root creature. That's your end of chapter joke for that one. This is some good tea. It's delicious today. Chapter 20. The black Mercedes tore through the streets of Lower Manhattan. Kay at the wheel once more, back where he belonged. He reached back to where Laura sat, never losing control of the car, even when he took her hand in his and said with a quiet gallantry, "May I?" She allowed him to draw her hand forward and look at the glowing charm bracelet. "I can't believe this charm bracelet is what everybody's after," she remarked. "You'd be surprised how often it's something small like that," Jay told her. He could have added a score and more of illustrative tales from the files of the Men in Black. All of them coincidentally featured himself as the hero. But before he had the opportunity, Kay cut in and took the wind right out of his sails. "The bracelet is telling us the departure point," Kay said. He, Jay, and Laura all gazed at the one charm on the bracelet that was glowing steadily, like the late unlamented firefly that the subway-dwelling Jeff had devoured. The charm was shaped like a little pyramid. A pyramid? The departure point was a pyramid? If they were in Cairo, okay, maybe. But in New York City? Jay frowned. He knew of an obelisk in Central Park, a sphinx or two, plus an entire Egyptian temple inside the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and all the mummies you could handle if you sneaked into the Yale Club. But a pyramid? And if that pyramid was the all-important departure point Kay was talking about, which was somehow connected to the ticking clock and the fate of the entire Zarthan civilization, it was a landmark Jay couldn't zero in on mentally if his life depended on it. Oh, wait a minute. His life did depend on it. His and every other life on Earth. Right, he thought grimly. No pressure. As if to make Jay's mental state even more cheerful, Kay went on to say, "It's also a fail-safe device. If we don't get to that departure point in 11 minutes and 15 seconds, that bracelet's going to go nuclear and destroy all life on Earth." "What?" Laura exclaimed, as in, "I've had a miniature 3-mile island dangling from my wrist for how many years now?" Before either of the agents could respond, something bumped the speeding Mercedes. Something big enough to make a conspicuous impact. Something fast enough to catch up to a car with the kind of land speed capability and make its presence felt. Something that could be nothing good. "What?" Kay explained, as in, "What the holy hell now?" Behind them, riding their tail, swooping in to bump up the Mercedes again, harder, was the spacecraft Yara had confected for Serlina's getaway. A fully regenerated Serlina sat in the controls, ramming the nose of her spaceship into the Mercedes again and again. Inside the car, Kay checked his watch. Time was flying faster than Selena. He glanced from the winking digital display to the infamous little red button on the Mercedes dashboard. He knew what it could do. That was one memory that could come back to him intact. One touch of that button, and the Mercedes would tear out of there so fast that Selena would be left to chew their dust and choke her own bile. He reached for the button. "No!" Jay screamed. Too late. Kay moved fast. He hit the button and braced himself for what he knew was coming. He got it. He got more. When you've been away from the office for a while, you got to expect a few changes. The Mercedes took off down the street in a streak of light, just as the entire dashboard, including the steering wheel, was swallowed up whole. Outside, slick, glossy panels clamped down over the gleaming black exterior, transforming the vehicle into a hybrid offspring that would get you across a top-of-the-line luxury car with a space shuttle. It was the sweetest piece of aerodynamic perfection ever spawned, with the sleek lines of a shark and an all-over look that would have given it the illusion of zipping by at jet speed, even if it was only standing still. Of course, it wasn't standing still just now. Not after Kay had gone ahead and pushed that little red button. Jay just had enough time to say, "Modified to hyperspeed," before the vehicle's full potential for acceleration really kicked in. Jerking their heads back, it might have been the worst case of whiplash on record. The transformed Mercedes hurtled through Manhattan in a blur that rode 10 feet off the ground. Yet Selena's spacecraft was right behind them. Their initial burst of speed might have put her off, but only for a moment. A craft meant to traverse the unimaginable spaces between the stars wasn't going to let an upstart MIB jalopy get away that easily, no matter how souped up it was. Inside the Mercedes, Jay, Kay, and Laura were plastered back against their seats, snugger than a cabbie's jeans. The denuded dashboard suddenly sprouted a stalk-like steering device. "This is?" Kay managed to force the words out of his distended mouth. "At hyperspeed, you need to fly it by the navigational stalk," Jay explained. "Okay." Jay grabbed the stalk with determination, grit, and not a whole lot of stock jockey experience. The Mercedes did a wild barrel roll around a corner and sent everyone inside flying. Somewhere in the universe, the well-meaning originator of the "always wear your seatbelt" / "buckle up for safety" campaign wept openly. Jay did a flip out of the passenger side seat and landed on top of Laura. "If we die," she began. Jay wasn't listening. He was too busy being freaked out of his mind by Kay's handling of the Mercedes. The way the old man was flying his baby, he might as well be working for Selena. "Triggers operate right and left ailerons," he shouted at Kay. "Toggle switch, stabilizers, and rudder." "Oh," was all Kay said, and thanks to this tidbit of in-flight training. He hit the switches and promptly flipped the Mercedes upside down like a big, shiny hyperspeed pancake. In the back seat, Jay and Laura flipped all along the car, landing her smack on top of him. "I want you to know you're the only person I've ever loved," she finished. "Really?" Now she's had Jay's attention. He gazed up into her eyes joyfully. "That's amazing. I feel..." The earth moved. They saw fireworks that were shaken to their very cores. The raging blaze came near to consuming them utterly. Actually, it was Selena firing a torpedo at the racing Mercedes. It exploded in a ball of flame. The Mercedes shot right through the fire, but began to spin out of control. Inside, Jay, Kay, and Laura were all screaming their full heads off. And when the situation was bad enough to make MIB agents scream, you knew it had to be bad. Jay began to inch his way back into the front seat, fighting the staggering G-forces every micrometer of the way. Turning back to Laura, he said, "I'll get back to you on that," before continuing his man-against-gravity struggle. She loved him, and that was wonderful. But it wasn't going to do either one of them a lick of good if they died in a hyperspeed car crash, or if they didn't make it to wherever the hell the city was in the pyramid before the failsafe device kicked in and all of Earth went up in a blast of cosmic dust. "Communicator," Jay commanded. "Worms." Back in the main hall of MIB headquarters, the Worm guys and Frank were lazing around in front of the big egg screen, smoking cigars, trading war stories, and feeling really good about themselves. Frank leaned in to get a light, then resumed his tale of how he'd dealt with Serlina. So I said, "Listen, bitch, if you don't want me to kick your skinny zone diet ass." "Worms!" Jay's frantic voice cut short Frank's account of the unusual bravery in the face of and/or skinny zone diet ass of the enemy. "Where are you?" "Main hall," Sleeble reported, setting aside his cigar. "Egg display." Serlina's pursuing ship swooped it under the flying Mercedes, fired another torpedo. It missed, but just barely. A miss that was supposed to be as good as a mile, but try telling that to the target. Jay was betting that Serlina would use the near miss to help her get their range, so that next time. He didn't want to think about the next time. He could feel time itself slipping away, along with the last of his lucky breaks. He had to do something before it was too late to do anything. Something for himself, for his partner, for MIB, for Earth, for Laura. "Lost control," he told the Worm guys. "Being fired on." Kay pressed the red button. "Computer at MIB can lock on and destroy a bogey. I'll walk you through it." Kay pressed the red... That was a voice line. Let me try that one more time. "Being fired on. Kay pressed the red button. Computer at MIB can lock on and destroy bogey. I'll walk you through it." Sleeble turned to the egg screen, ready and willing to do what it took to help his friends and save the Earth again. No way could Frank top that. He reached confidently for the controls. But there on the egg screen, a row of bars was blinking, brightly along the bottom. Computer shut down improperly. Reconfiguring hard drive. 7 minutes remaining. Jay," Sleeble began. "When we turned off the electricity, we may have..." The blast of a torpedo came in loud and clear over the communicator, so loud that it shook the Worm guys where they stood. Frank shouldered his way up to the microphone and gravely said, "Jay?" "Jay?" Frank shouldered his way up to the microphone and gravely said, "Jay?" "Frank, you were the best time partner a Romulan could ever have. Godspeed." He hung up. Sometimes you just didn't want to be there as a witness, even long distance when a friend of yours was about to buy the ranch. In the Mercedes, while Jay fumed over Frank's defeatist dismissal, Kay wasn't just sitting idle, waiting to be rescued. That wasn't Kay's style. His eyes searched the largely unfamiliar controls of the transformed Mercedes until they lit in on one particular button. He'd seen Jay use it. He knew what it was for, and he was sure it was the right one for saving them all and regaining control. When you don't know how to operate a vehicle, call in someone who does. Kay hit the button and the inflatable automatic pilot deployed right in his lap. Unfortunately, instead of taking the wheel and getting the Mercedes back under control, the inflated dummy just sat there, arms dangling uselessly at his side. "He's not piloting," Kay announced, a man betrayed. "Not designed for hyperspeed," Jay explained. Like that was going to make it all better. "I could use a steering wheel," Kay shouted. He groped blindly around the inflated, ineffective autopilot, reaching for the navigational stalk and only succeeding in pushing the dummy down onto the controls. The Mercedes spun around crazily, like a flaming pinwheel escaped from the 4th of July fireworks display. Jay slipped under the dashboard and fought his way again, battling to reach the controls as he flung his way inside the car like a ping-pong ball. "Left paddle," he directed Kay. "Not the trigger, the top left." The two MIB agents struggled to switch seats, fighting the inflated autopilot every step of the way. At last they made it, leaving Jay in the driver's seat where he could do the most good. He laid hold of the controls in triumph. "Mama never buy you a Game Boy?" he asked Kay as he took over. With Jay mastering the helm, the Mercedes righted itself smoothly and did a fast, elegant barrel roll out in the way of Serlena's pursuing ship. It was too bad that the MIB agent couldn't hold on to that little lead. Selena's ship still had a greater speed capability, and it soon closed the gap. The Kylothian warrior bore down upon them relentlessly. The Mercedes pinpointed in her sights and fired another torpedo. Jay caught sight of the deadly missile in their tail, and gave the Mercedes a tiny flick of the wrist, sending the Mercedes into a hard right turn. The torpedo overshot its target and exploded just beyond them. It was a good maneuver, but Jay wouldn't be able to use it more than once. Serlena was a fast learner, and someone who passionately believed in, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, I'll kill you. The next time she fired a torpedo at them. No, better not to think that way. Better think of how to get away from her. Get to the departure point. Get the light off Earth while there still was an Earth. But how? And then Jay happened to look down at the New York City streets below. Something caught his eye. A memory stirred. A thought clicked. Inspiration struck, and his whole mind lit up like Christmas with a wild, triumphant yes! Hang on, he told his passengers. Straight down. He turned the Mercedes down. It was heading nose first for the terminal date in the sidewalks of New York. No, Laura screamed. Down is bad. Straight down is idiotic. Jay didn't argue. He simply pulled back ever so slightly on the stick. The Mercedes nosed up just enough to go zooming right down the welcoming mouth of a subway entrance, without an inch to spare. If Jay hoped to lose his pursuer by going to ground or underground, it was a hope that was soon dashed. In the street above, Serlena's spaceship hardly missed a beat before flying into the subway after them. The commuters standing in the Chambers Street station glanced up from their newspapers to see if that roaring sound was their long-awaited train. It had been a tiring day, and man, would it ever feel good to get home and take their shoes off. It wasn't a train. It was a tricked-out, sleek-down, teched-up flying Mercedes, quickly followed by a spaceship that took out a chunk of cement wall and part of the Chambers Street sign station. Street station sign. The commuters didn't even bother to shrug as they went back to reading their papers. Down the tunnel, the Mercedes' high-powered halogen headlights turned the darkness to brightest day. In her spacecraft, Serlena couldn't help but remark, "Nice. Very nicely engineered." Her appreciation didn't deter her from her purpose. She gunned her vehicle and gave the car another bump, harder than the previous ones. Her assault knocked it sideways, tearing out a big block of concrete and rebar wall. Serlena eased up slightly on the throttle, the better to survey her handiwork. It was impressive. She smashed in the rear end of the MIB vehicle as easily as a frat boy could crush a beer can on his forehead. "The bumpers aren't great over 300, she commented, as though making mental notes for the intergalactic edition of Consumer Reports. Pleased, she hit them again. Sparks from the damaged electrical wiring flew everywhere, gouging through the tunnel. "Subway doesn't seem like the best place to lose her," Kay observed. Jay wasn't listening. "Where is he?" he muttered. "Where the hell is he?" "He?" Kay echoed. A shape, large and lumbering, loomed out of the darkness just beyond the reach of the Mercedes headlights. "Jeff," said Jay. The gigantic worm thing screeched in rage and recognition as soon as he caught the sight of Jay in the driver's seat of the Mercedes. The only force that coursed through Jeff's body more intensely than his all-consuming appetite was his ability to carry a grudge. He remembered that Jay had done to him, remembered it perfectly, and it made him hungry for the one thing he couldn't digest: a revenge. The sight of Jay was provocation enough, but the MIB agent went on to make things worse, waving cavalierly at the creature, deliberately taunting him. Jeff screeched again, madder, and opened his titanic jaws wide, eager to engulf the miserable human being who had been responsible for having him moved back to his less than satisfactory hunting ground. Revoke his travel privileges, huh? He'd show him. He'd swallow him whole. If that didn't teach that lousy son of a Terran a lesson, nothing would. Teeth glittering, throat red and pulsing, Jeff stood poised to gulp down the recklessly onrushing Mercedes and all who rode in it. "Come to Papa." "Jeff," Laura repeated, staring down the scarlet gullet that stretched before her like a straight-to-hell water slide. She was almost calm, the same sort of calm that overtakes people in the instant after the car shoots over the edge of a cliff, or the sizzling fuse vanishes into the keg full of gunpowder, or the bombing barrel comes within sight of Niagara Falls. That ruthless alien who killed Ben was right behind them, right on top of them. One way or another, they were all going to die. No sense in getting worried about the inevitable. At least she told Jay she loved him. At least she'd have that to take with her into whatever was waiting on the other side of Jeff. An abiding sense of peace and surrender settled over her like a well-warmed stadium blanket. Bye-bye, world. It was nice knowing you. And then, breaking through the unnatural barricade of serenity, she heard Jay shout, "Hold on!" And he cut the throttle dead. The Mercedes stopped. Bam! Snap! Period. No skid, no slide, no such thing as momentum, nothing. Dead in place. It stopped. It dropped to the subway tracks like a stone, and Selena looked out in front of her spacecraft in time to not see the damaged rear end of the MIB vehicle, but teeth? She flew right over the Mercedes and directly down Jeff's open gullet. It was over in an instant. The monster gulped, flicked his tail, and disappeared down the tracks into the darkness. Yummers. Heavy, but nutritious. The worm equivalent of sour braten. Somewhere inside his tiny mind, the hulking creature reached the conclusion that Selena's spaceship was Jay's attempt at a reconciliation gift. His way of saying he was sorry for what he'd done to Jeff earlier. Nice of the MIB agent to think of doing that, Jeff reasoned. Mighty nice. Jeff might be a gigantic extraterrestrial worm thing, but his mama had raised him with an appreciation for good manners. Before he grown large enough to devour her. So if the man had made an honest effort at restoring cordial relations between him, the least the worm could have do was accept it graciously. All was forgiven. Miss Manners would have been pleased. Jay, Kay, and Laura looked at one another. Kay's eyes surveyed the interior of the Mercedes. He nodded, satisfied. "Still a Ford man," he said, "but a very decent ride." Chapter 21, the last chapter. Whew. Here we are. The absolute thrilling conclusion of The Men in Black 2. That damn doorbell had to go off, didn't it? Oh well. Screw it. Chapter 21. The Mercedes flew through the subway system that honeycombs New York City, emerging at a stop near the foot of Manhattan Island. In the distance, the Statue of Liberty raised her golden arch against the night sky, all atwinkle with stars. The car climbed the air to one of the many surrounding rooftops and roared to a stop within plain sight of the famous monument. The rooftops of New York are more than pigeon refugees. They are a kingdom in the clouds, a realm unto themselves, a conglomeration of individual sites as culturally diverse as Disney's Small World ride. New York City rooftops can encompass anything from simple swaths of tar, purely utilitarian, to the elaborate penthouse garden playgrounds of the rich and show-offy. This particular rooftop looked as if it had once been more than the topmost layer of a building, for it still boasted vestiges of a less practical, more owner-indulged past. There were hints of an attempt at crafting a Zen garden, including one of those large decorative rocks so popular during the 1980s heyday when all things Japanese were in. Having a lump of stone that size on a roof not only helped the owner meditate on the transient nature of material goods, it also proclaimed that he had the bucks necessary to haul something that big and useless all the way up to Pigeon Central. In the open space below, a glass pyramid twinkled by the lights of the lofty buildings. The Mercedes door opened and Jay, Kay, and Laura got out. Jay took a moment to glance over the edge of the rooftop, to double-check on the glittering pyramid that lay beneath them. Mentally, he congratulated himself for having recalled, before the clock ran out, that there was, in fact, such a structure in New York City. It was hell on his nerves, but damn, he really did his best under pressure. Departure point located and secured. Check. Now he looked around avidly, seeking the one thing they needed if they were going to save the world right before time ran out. He knew his partner could be tight-lipped, but when you're the only guy on planet who knows how to actually use the thing that can save the planet, it's time to stop playing Yup, Nope, Gary Cooper and start chattering like all those ladies on The View put together. "Running out of time, Kay," he said. "Where's the light?" Kay took Laura by the hand. Around her wrist, the bracelet that could save the Earth caught the city lights and twinkled, the pyramid charm still blinking. "A code, Laura," Kay said to her with a quiet tension. "Think, Laura. A combination. Anything. Did Ben ever say anything to you about a code? A special date? Anything?" Laura's brow creased in thought as she struggled to deal with this line of questioning. She stared down at the bracelet, still coping with all the things that had happened to her in such a short span of time. Out of everything she'd seen and experienced, of all the impossibilities she'd been asked to believe, this was the hardest. To accept the fact that the fate of her world and of another world whose existence she never even suspected were dangling from her wrist. How could it be? The bracelet looked like just another piece of borderline kish, something a female out-of-towner might pounce on as a perfect souvenir to commemorate her once-in-a-lifetime trip to New York City. She thought of that time back in the pizzeria when she'd been dealing with a plumbing problem and almost lost it down the toilet. An icy chill shook her to the bone as she realized what that would mean now. It was weird enough to comprehend that the trinket she cherished for years was the fabled light of Sartha. But to suddenly be told that it wouldn't be enough just to hand it over, that two worlds were depending on her memory to dredge up the way of activating this thing? No pressure, right? A code. She thought hard, refusing to let the urgency of the situation make her freeze up, keep her from remembering. "There was a song," she said. "Ben used to sing to me when I was little. A lullaby. 4, 3, 2, I love you. 7, 8, 9, ain't that fine. I still sing it to myself when I can't get to sleep, but that can't be." Kay didn't wait for her to finish. He grabbed the bracelet and manipulated it rapidly, keying in the numbers. "It's the code," he said. "It will activate the light." While Kay worked feverishly over the bracelet, Jay pulled the napkin he'd taken from Ben's famous pizza out of his pocket and held it up. Looking from the flimsy piece of paper out across the water to where the Statue of Liberty stood guard over New York Harbor, looking at the beloved monument, he couldn't help remembering a time when his whole life was simpler, when he didn't have to deal with aliens or the men in black or finally finding someone to love. His gaze shifted back to the napkin in his hand. Then it hit him. Every symbol on it aligned perfectly with the scene that lay before him now. Ben's famous pizza, the napkins, the pizza boxes, everything that could carry the store's logo, printed with the images of the slice of pizza that pointed upwards to the Statue of Liberty, who in turn aimed her torch straight for the stars. But it wasn't a slice of pizza, was it? The glass pyramid in the plaza seemed to wink up at him as if to say, "Took you long enough, Slick. Oh, you were close, closer than you knew, back when you guessed that the slice was supposed to be an arrow pointing the way. Only then you thought it was pointing the way to a can of anchovies. Well, surprise, Junior. It ain't anchovies." Laura looked at him, her eyes following his gaze. She had spent years of her life working in Ben's famous pizza, surrounded by copies of that logo. She recognized it right away. as the glass pyramid continued to glow like its miniature counterpart, its point indicating Lady Liberty. As Lady Liberty's torch came into direct alignment with one particular star, just as Agent K keyed in the final digit of the code, that's when the atmosphere snapped and sizzled. The star above the golden torch flared, blazed, then shot out a beam of pure energy that lanced through the air to strike the large decorative rock on the roof beside them. There was a blinding flash, and the rock transformed beneath a rippling skin of electricity. Then the light was gone. The rock was gone. In its place, a space capsule sat waiting. Kay looked at Laura, his expression clearly indicating that he wanted her to place the light of Zartha in the vessel that would carry it safely away to fulfill its destiny before the fail-safe device could turn Earth into a gaping black hole. She nodded, silently accepting the honor, and began to move reverently towards the space capsule. It was a beautiful moment, poetic, and, in its own way, unutterably heroic. But there's always someone in the audience who seems to live solely for the purpose of spoiling moments like that. With a hideous roar from below, Jeff's massive worming body came crashing up through the glass pyramid on the plaza. His roar echoed and re-echoed through the abandoned streets. Jeff! Jay hated having nice, romantic moments ruined. He hated it when some geek had a coughing fit during Juliet's death scene at Shakespeare in the Park. He really hated it when some moron suggested that they reshoot the ending of Casablanca so that Rick got to keep the girl. And he really, really hated it when a big subterranean dwelling worm had chosen the opportunity to screw up his romantic moment with Laura. I am so not in the mood for you, Jay shouted at the tactless worm. Get your long ass back to the subway, or I'm going to tranquilize you with something that you won't wake up from. There was a loud, moist, deeply disturbing rip sound from the plaza. You might say that Jeff had decided to ignore Jay's threat, but then you wouldn't be saying nearly enough. Jeff wasn't feeling himself anymore, to put it mildly. Jeff's skin was what made that ripping sound as it split wide open, like an exploding banana shucking its own peel, revealing a core of nightmare. It was Serlina, but Serlina hideously transformed, a Serlina that was part woman, part cluster of twitching, lashing, dripping neural roots, with just a smidge of Victoria's Secret supermodel clinging to the whole ungodly package. Jay stared down at the unspeakable, ghastly vision below and couldn't help but mutter, "You are what you eat." "That's not good," said Kay. He grabbed Laura by the wrist and pulled her away toward the capsule. There was no longer any time to treat the light of Zartha with the reverence it deserved, not with that thing on the playing field. If there was any question as to whether the horror show creature was Jeff after an overdose of Serlina, or Serlina after a binge of devouring Jeff, it soon vanquished. The monster spied Laura on the rooftop and lashed out one writhing neural root to seize her. Yeah, that was Serlina all right. Jay's combat reflexes kicked in without a second's hesitation. He threw himself between Laura and the monster's brambly tentacle, shoving her out of harm's way. The neural root missed its original target, but Serlina was willing to make the best of things. The root lashed itself around Jay's neck and pulled him back, screaming as more and more roots sprang up, wrapping him in strand after strand of twisting, immobilizing bramble. Laura couldn't help it. She stopped dead in her tracks and stared in disbelief at what happened to the man she loved. "Jay!" She called out his name in vain as Serlina's roots engulfed him completely. "Kay, a little help!" Jay called out desperately from deep inside the belly of the beast. Kay whipped out his weapon and fired. The blast knocked Serlina back, though it did not stop her. "Laura, get the bracelet to the pod!" Kay ordered as he fired another round at the monster. This one tore a gaping hole in Serlina's side. Jay's head popped out of the hole like a meerkat on speed, only to be quickly sucked back inside. Jay squeezed off another blast at the monster, then one more for good measure, doing his best to cover Laura, who was still hypnotized by the horror before her. Serlina shook off the effects of Kay's assault, regrouped, and came back at him with Laura with a vengeance. Kay fired at the monster again, ripping open a fresh hole through a snarl of neural roots. This time, one of Jay's shoulders popped out of the monstrous alien, his dapper black suit jacket smoldering like a badly doused bonfire. "Ah! Aim higher!" came the deeply annoyed directive from inside the creature. "He's fine," Kay called out for Laura's benefit, and fired right into the monster's face. The impact knocked her down, but she was a warrior, and clearly she felt warriors don't stop just because some puny earthling with an overdeveloped death wish smears their mascara. Warriors kill, then they check a mirror and reapply. Serlina staggered back, recovered, and advanced once more, lurching down toward Kay and Laura. "He does this all the time," Kay shouted at Laura, desperate for a way to get her moving again, before it was too late for them all. "Laura, the bracelet!" She snapped out of her trance and moved towards the pod. Kay said a silent prayer of thanksgiving and laid down a fusillade of covering fire. He fired volley after volley at the ever-nearing Serlina with a steady hand, a sharp eye, unimpeachable aim. He hit her again and again and again, but it didn't stop her. It only slowed her down, and not enough. It also ripped a lacework pattern of holes throughout her brambly, worm-shaped tangle of a body. Jay's head popped out of one of the holes upside down and declared, "We're just making her mad, Kay." Bang! Kay got enough another round before Jay was yanked back inside. You can't keep a good man down. His head popped out again from another hole and added, "We need!" Bang, bang! Kay fired 2 more blasts into the monster. Yoink! The creature sucked Jay out of sight. Not for long. Like some freakish demented whack-a-mole game, Jay popped out of yet a 3rd spot in Serlina's multi-perforated body. He was just able to shout, "A bigger!" before Kay opened up her brambly hide with a triple shot, and she absorbed him with one more time. "Weapon!" Jay yelled at the top of his lungs. Damn, seemed like he'd never get that sentence finished. It was hard to get a word in edgewise when Kay got his game face on. As Kay continued to wage a losing war against the doggedly oncoming Serlina, a misshapen figure stepped out of the rooftop shadows. Above the sound of repeated blaster reports, the monster's roars of rage, and the warm hum of still stationary space capsule, a familiar voice inquired politely, "Proton bomb?" It was Scrad/Charlie, who had somehow managed to trail the light of Zartha and the men in black to the prearranged departure point. Now the Scrad entirely held out the brightly shining metal orb, thrusting it towards Kay as if it were some kind of peace offering. Obviously, Charlie had bought his body mate around to seeing things his way when it came to Serlina. This time, Jay's head popped out of Serlina's mouth, like one of those curly paper noisemakers. "Thank you," he exulted. It was just what the doctor ordered, if you had the right HMO. That deceptively small silver spear packed megatonnage like Mama used to make. Jay's hand reached out of Serlina's mouth as Scrad literally tossed him the long bomb. "Hey, where's the detonator?" Jay cried. This wasn't the kind of surprise he liked. "We broke it," Charlie admitted sheepishly. "Kay, shoot them! Shoot them!" Jay shouted in anger and frustration. He didn't really mean it. It just made him feel better to say it. Okay, maybe he did really mean it, but Kay wasn't listening. But this was no time for playing the blame game. Kay opened fire on Serlina's again, and Jay did a backflip out of the monster's mouth, then leapt back up and slam-dunked the proton bomb down her throat, landing at Scrad/Charlie's feet. "We request asylum as political prisoners of the tyrannical Kylothians," Scrad recited formally. Charlie's head sprang out of the knapsack in time to add, "We love New York. It's the only place we've ever fit in." While Scrad/Charlie was pledging allegiance to the Big Apple, there was still a big worm infestation that needed to be terminated. Jay and Kay weren't wasting any time. As the light began its departure, they made a beeline for the trunk of the Mercedes, where the really serious firepower was stowed. Serlena's grotesque head swung away from Jay and her deflecting minion, back to where the little space capsule had finally lifted off the rooftop. The tiny craft blew through the sky, heading for the still shining starbeam piercing the darkness from just above Lady Liberty's torch. Either Selena didn't notice that J and K were doing, or she knew that even MIB's most heavy-duty weaponry was no match for her. She had other fish to fry, specifically one twinkling little charm bracelet, shaped fish, that was in imminent danger of becoming the one that got away. No one and nothing got away from Serlena, not twice. She headed off after the escaping light of Zartha at a gallop. The capsule had already risen above her earthbound reach, but she regarded that just as temporary advantage for her prey. Extremely temporary. Wings sprouted from her back, and the immense bulk of her part worm, part bramble body soared into the air. Jay looked to Kay. Both of them were armed now. Jay nodded. They slammed down the action of their weapons in unison, a sweetly synchronized movement that only went to show what a great partnership is a thing of beauty. Kid, Kay said. Yeah? Thanks for bringing me back. Jay gave a little half smile. No problem. He sneaked a look to check on Laura. She was standing by the car, looking stunned by everything that was going down around her, but otherwise okay. There was no time for further talk. Serlena was airborne and gaining on the capsule. Together, they raised their weapons, sighted along the barrels, and tracked Serlena's flight, as if she were the biggest, ugliest clay pigeon that the fine sport of skeet shooting had ever known. It was all that Jay could do to keep himself from shouting, "Pull!" 2 shots burst from their weapons and hit Serlena squarely where it counted, just as her neural roots were beginning to wrap themselves around the fleeing sphere. The Kylothian's hold on the capsule broke as she paused to survey the 2 smoking wounds in her massive body. She was only marginally concerned, though. Her whole attitude seemed to sneer. Oh, really? Like that's going to stop me? But then she glared back at J and K. Something was wrong. Though she was still aloft, they didn't look all distressed. They didn't look at least a bit worried that victory and that damn elusive light of Zartha were almost within her grasp. They looked happy. They weren't supposed to look happy. They didn't know when they lost. What did they think their miserable weapons could do to stop? That was when Kay gave her a little wave. Bye-bye. And Serlena exploded in a breathtakingly beautiful pyrotechnic display that would have had the geniuses behind the Macy's 4th of July fireworks show taking notes. Of course, no one could have ever hoped to duplicate the effect that would take another proton bomb and a couple of crack shots to set it off in lieu of its broken detonator. Not exactly the sort of thing you can budget for, even at Macy's. Then a second brilliant burst of light filled the air. The sphere carrying the light of Zartha was engulfed in the full glory of the energy serve that transported it instantly off Earth. Back it flew to a world awaiting its power, its salvation. All who witnessed it shielded their eyes from the overwhelming radiance. When they could see again, it was over. The sphere was gone. The last telltale glory of Serlena's explosion fell over the city in a beautiful ethereal glow, more wonderful than 1,000 sunsets. All was silent. The crisis was averted. Earth and Zartha were saved. Jay was the first to break the silence. What was it like? He asked Kay. On the outside? It was nice, Kay replied, after only a little reflection. Slept late on weekends, watched the Weather Channel. He paused and slowly, leisurely let his gaze drift all around the full panorama of the familiar New York skyline. I did miss the city, though. Then he caught the glimpse of Jay looking at the still dazed Laura. Kay turned to his partner. I went off book 25 years ago, and it almost destroyed the planet. He looked at Laura and then back to Jay again and quietly said, "It's your decision. You'll do the right thing." For a time, Jay just stood there, drinking in the sight of the woman he loved, thinking about the job he'd just done. It would be so easy to call in past favors, to get Kay to free him from being one of the men in black, to take his own place on the outside. But where could that be? He remembered how it had been for Kay, the vague longings he couldn't explain, couldn't satisfy, the sense of there being something more to his life than a 9-to-5 job, sleeping late on weekends, watching the Weather Channel. Sure, he'd gone back to marry his long-suffering fiancée, but it hadn't lasted. She left him because she couldn't compete with a dream, even a dream Kay could no longer really remember. A neuralizer flash worked only on your mind, but there were some things a man carried in his soul. Agent K was MIB through and through. Was Agent J any different? If he left the agency and married Laura, would her love be strong enough to fight his buried dreams? Or would it only be a matter of time before she left him too? Would he be strong enough to look at the stars and see only stars? We are who we are. Jay knew the words, and he truly knew their meaning. He walked towards Laura, slipping on his Ray-Bans and pulling out his neuralizer. "I just want you to know you're the only person I've ever loved," he told her just before the blinding flash of memory-altering lights dazzled her eyes. "The city of New York would like to thank you for your participating in our architectural survey," he concluded lamely. It was the best he could do on a broken heart. Before the after-flash of the neuralizer completely faded from the air, backup MIB agents were suddenly there to escort Laura away, back to a life where the only alien monsters she would have to deal with were safely confined to the realm of science fiction. As they led her off, Jay called after her, "Maybe we can have pie sometimes." "Hey, what about us?" Scrad/Charlie piped up, breaking the mood of Jay's wistful farewell, as thoroughly as they had broken the detonator on the proton bomb. "There's always an opening at the post office," Kay told them. "Post office?" The two-headed alien repeated. "Yes!" Both heads wore big, goofy smiles. As Serlena's former minion dreamily contemplated the joys of a rewarding career in public service, Jay and Kay took a long, searching look at each other. "Come on," Kay said. He wasn't good with words, and he knew that there really wasn't anything to say to Jay that would make him stop hurting. All he could do was get him back to the work that let time do the rest. "Let's get going." He turned his back on the Statue of Liberty and began to walk away. Jay fell into step with his partner's side. "Get going?" he echoed, incredulous. For the good of the planet, he'd been forced to say goodbye to the love of his life. Now he was back in full MIB mode, bearing the hurt deep in the demands of his work. And one of the prime duties of that work was effecting swift and certain cover-up for any and all instances of alien activities on this planet. It was the only remedy he could come up with for such a big loss on such short notice, turning himself into as big a by-the-book, pain-in-the-ass stickler for regulations as Kay was. When you're bitching and moaning about how badly someone else has screwed things up, you don't have the time to think about a broken heart. "Thousands of people in New York and New Jersey must have seen our little event," he declared, trying to make Kay realize that this wasn't something they could simply walk away from. "Plans need to be totally thought out. A plan needs to be cool. How the hell are we going to explain?" "Kid," Kay interrupted, "I'll get you trained yet." He raised his ancient pulsar watch and pushed a button on it. Behind them, the golden torch on the Statue of Liberty flared up in a blinding flash that could only come from the biggest neuralizer the world had ever known. The glare of light flooded the rooftop, flooded the city, surged out over the entire tri-state area in an inundation of controlled forgetfulness. No one would ever be able to remember seeing a space capsule flying towards the Statue of Liberty, or an unthinkable monster pursuing it, or anything at all connected with the light of Zartha. And that was exactly as it should be. You didn't really think I put Earth in jeopardy without a backup plan, did you, Slick? Kay asked. Dazzled in the giant neuralizer's backwash, Jay stood gaping for a moment and then said, I want one of those. What a joke to end it on. What a fucking joke. What a fucking joke to end it on. Wow. No, not bad. Not bad at all. They did it. They saved the Earth. They neuralized everyone. Here came the men in black. Galaxy defenders. The men in black were here to save the Earth from aliens and such. Oh, here come the men in black. The Galaxy Defenders. My friends. Thank you. We've officially completed the first story, the first book. We did it. Men in Black 2. God, what a good story. What? I just don't even know how you could not love that. Just not entirely. Just love it. Just love. Friends, family. Thank you. I cannot thank you. You are why I did this. So that we could join together and have fun and just have a great time together, This will be continuing, and it will get better. And we have a great fucking Christmas book coming up for y'all. Yeah, they totally changed it up. They decided to switch up. Big switch up. But the fact is, Julie, that it is a possibility that this book came out before the movie did, and that could have been how the original ending was going to be, but they decided to change it in the movie. I don't know the actual timeline. I assume it came out before it because this person was working off a script. So that may have been how the original ending was supposed to be, but they decided that they were going to fucking change it up because here came the Men in Black again. So all right, the big surprise. You've waited. You've been here the whole time. We're going to be reading Gremlins for Christmas. We're doing that. We're doing the Gremlins. My God. Don't get them wet. Don't feed them past midnight. My God. What an amazing fucking story of the Gremlins. I got to come up with a voices for everybody. Not going to be racist and do some old Asian man voice. He'll have a sweet voice though. We'll enjoy it. I'll make sure all my gremlins are, hanging out in the background. I've been building a collection of gremlins. There's a lot of them, and I even have the coolest one. Christmas Spike. He's got a little freaking Santa Claus costume. This one's awesome. So, get you stoked for Gremlins. All right, y'all. Thank you. Jake, you know the Gremlin noises are going to be good. You know they're going to be good. I'm going to be Howie Mandel. Should have got out of there, and they should have hired me if I was alive. But no big deal. I'll be here for the Gremlins remake to do Gizmo. Universal. You watching this? I know Joe Dante watches my thing. He's one of those subscribers. It was Joe Dante. If you didn't know that, so that's why I'm doing Gremlins. He suggested it specifically. Love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I cannot wait to see you guys next week. Yeah. We're going for higher production values. We're going to be rocking everyone's fucking socks off, man. That's the whole plan. Kicking ass with some stories. Only reason I'm skipping these guys is because Christmas is coming up. And none of these are very Christmassy. Unless you think like Suicide Squad or Spider-Man 3 could be Christmassy. But after the Gremlins, we are going to get on one of those amazing Marvel books. I think Suicide Squad would be fun. It is a book based off of a movie, based off of a comic book, and stars. I mean, the book doesn't star Jared Leto, but you know, just think about that stupid fucking Jared Leto laugh. Fuck. All right, friends. I'm also thinking about doing some video game stuff. We'll see. Maybe playing Cyberpunk. That game's pretty fun. Playing Dead by Daylight. That game is awesome. But we'll see. We'll see if I get into that. That's a little trolly, and I don't know if I can handle that. But we'll see. We'll see. The future is always a possibility. Thank you. 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 Ho ho!